So the opening of Vertigo is, for me, Bernard Herrmann's extraordinary ability to encapsulate an entire film down into one musical texture and two chords. Get this. Here's the first texture. Now remember, Saul Bass's extraordinary swirling images as that music's happening. We are somewhere in which we're already on the back foot. There's a sense that we're sort of spinning, that we don't know exactly where we are. That's before we've had any melody, we've had any tune, before we've had any information. And we get the first bit of information with the stars' names coming in underneath that lovely swirling sound. The next one, when we've got Kim Novak, great big fat chord, but still with those same notes in it. Hitchcock, when his name comes, provides a complete contrast. That's the first time we actually get a sense that this is going to be an atonal score. But then from there, we get this wonderful climb up the side of a building. Into these two chords. And then a repeat of that first chord. Now that, to me, in four chords, you have the whole film. This doesn't resolve. It's tension. The tension's still there. This not only resolves, it resolves as a romantic chord. And so that sense of an unfinished story, of work still to be done, of finding out who this woman is, then resolves to the love that's going to grow between the two of them. A love that's going to grow in two separate cars, which will then be finished with a death and then brought back after death. Because let's not forget, this is a film about a man falling in love with a dead woman. There are two ideas in Vertigo, both very perverse ones, that would really have appealed to Hitchcock and Herrmann. One is the idea that vertigo itself can be such a paralyzing condition that it prevents our hero seeing a crime and therefore provides the perfect alibi for that crime. The other is the idea that he could fall in love with a woman who is primarily in his imagination. Those two ideas seem to have been so fruitful for Hitchcock and Herrmann that they brought their best work to bear on it. They're almost symbiotic. They're joined at the hip. This is one time when Hitchcock barely had to tell Herrmann what he needed, and Herrmann barely had to tell Hitchcock what he wanted. And each time they came together on this movie, they produced fantastic stuff. It was Herrmann's favourite score. It's mine as well. And he brought to it every single trick that he had in his toolbox. Wagner, this sense of an almost unrequited passion from Tristan and Isolde. Shorthand, he got the whole film down to virtually two chords. And this wonderful sense that he always had of the difference between resolution and non-resolution, of how the music keeps you waiting, stretching like an elastic band until eventually, pow, You get what you wanted. This is, for me, a movie and a score that I can come back to time and time again and find something new. And after it, they never really, for my money, achieved quite the same depth of ability between the two of them. Knowing how Hitchcock felt about collaboration, which was basically he never had any collaborators, he just had people who he told what to do, I do wonder if on this occasion, just once, he realised that Herrmann was just as important as he was. And in fact, Vertigo could not work without Herrmann's music. Now, when Herrmann needs that sense of old San Francisco and of the Spanish world in which Madeleine's nightmares have brought her, this ancestor who may be now haunting her and may be turning her mad, he goes to this particular rhythm. Very broad, very, very obvious. Jam, ba-di-da-dum, ba-di-da. It's got all that Spanish feel to it. And he puts castanets in, of course it's Spanish, but not tick-tick-tick-tick-tick-tick, that's a dance. He just puts it in on the offbeat. Chunk. That immediately feels like bum, but dum bum. There's actually no romance in this Spanish music at all. It's pure threat. And even though we only hear it from time to time when he begins to realize this connection that Madeleine has with the painting, we still only get that. Now, as he begins to fill out the sound, he puts in the same falling motif that we hear throughout the whole of Vertigo. There's a horrible kind of inevitability to what's happening with that. But the most important thing about it, more than anything else, is that we're in the same territory as Psycho. Because in the same way as those strings give you that shoo, 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 shoo sound in Psycho, you've got bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-dum, bum. And they're cutting hard string sounds. So that by the time we get to James Stewart's amazing Nightmare, in which he is drawn towards an open grave and falls down inside it, we're already prepared for it. We already know that music doesn't say love, it doesn't say romance, it doesn't say how lovely old San Francisco was. It says death, and death coming at you that you cannot avoid. After Stewart has lost her, after he couldn't get up that tower and has thought that she's jumped, this Spanish music has now become hammer blows in his head. And the nightmare that we get to see, beautifully visualised, is also fantastically well scored. Hitchcock has basically choreographed his images to Herrmann's strange Spanish swirl. And we're with him from the beginning to the end. And if you like, this is also kind of a little bit like the thematic ballet you used to get with Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, where in the second half you get a ballet that summed up the whole film. Here we have a nightmare that sums up the whole film. And at the end, Stewart is heading into an open grave and falling and falling and falling. And listen to the blare of that last chord. It's no longer a place of safety, it's no longer a place of comfort. We can't follow that music anywhere we know. It's taken us to a cold, empty place full of horror. And all we can have at the end of that is Stewart sitting up, bolt upright in bed, staring straight at us, eyeball to eyeball, covered in sweat, absolutely horrified. The moment that Stuart brings Madeline back to life again, that incredible scene in which he finally persuades her to look how she looked when he thought she'd died. That is a beautiful love theme that Bernard Herrmann uses. And he's drawing on Wagner, of all people, Tristan and Isolde. And Tristan and Isolde is this sense of a love that's never completed, which is the same as we heard in the opening chords. There's always a sense of sadness about it, of incompletion, of something not resolving. Now, we mentioned resolution earlier on. This is what resolution's about. This resolves. This doesn't resolve because it's going somewhere else. And that sense of being taken somewhere else is part of the toolbox. In fact, it's one of the major parts of the toolbox that the composer has. Film particularly. We want to know when the music is going to actually finally reach its home point. You'll notice with the Nightmare music, it never did. It went to a great big fat chord as James Stewart woke up and stared into the camera in horror. Here, we build up. And it builds and builds and builds until we finally get. And even there, he doesn't give us a final chord. Even as the two of them are deep in each other's arms, and we've been around them time and time and time again, it takes forever to actually get to that final place. Bernard Herrmann is a master of unresolution, and if he'd wanted to, he could have kept that unresolved for the whole of the length of the film. The only ones who wouldn't have been satisfied would have been us, the audience, because we like resolution. Hitchcock had already had his lovers meeting in a passionate romantic space, down on the beach with the waves breaking behind them, or if you like, in front of a rear screen with the waves breaking behind them. But the main thing was that they had had their passionate moment. When they met again after her supposed death, and James Stewart has persuaded the girl to dress up exactly as he remembered Madeline being, then suddenly we need something new. And Hitchcock, in his notes to his sound people, actually does write the sentence, "Keep the sound down here, because I believe Mr. Herrmann will have something to say." Boy, did he. This is one of the most beautiful pieces of music anybody ever wrote in the 20th century, let alone Bernard Herrmann. It tells us what it feels like to wait, what it feels like to not know what you've done. It tells us what it feels like to see somebody you love in a way that you never thought you'd see them, but always hoped you would. By the end of this extraordinary film, Hitchcock has achieved what he always wants to achieve. He's made us witness something that has put us outside our comfort zones. But in this case, it's a very adult story. And in order to be able to tell that story with all the maturity it required, he not only needed an actor we completely believed in the case of James Stewart, he needed a score that put us exactly where he wanted us to be. By the end of the film, we're wrung out. This has been an extraordinary adventure, and Herrmann has got so much credit to take for getting us through it. In later films, Hitchcock would try and do the same thing again and couldn't quite pull off the trick, but they could with this one. And I think it's because he and Herrmann understood at a very basic level something about the perversity of love, and the fact that love can be dark, can be painful, harrowing, frightening, almost disgusting, and yet still something you would not want to live without. That's quite a thing to get out of a movie.